I'm Elise Mihailowski with EHOP, and I'm here with Jon Graziano, who is the chair for the Elementary School Building Committee for Elmwood.
Good evening.
He's here to answer some questions that we thought you guys might also have. So first of all, where is the proposed location for the new Elmwood School?
Sure. So after a lot of analysis, we have targeted the lot next to the Marathon School that is known as the former Tadaro property that the town acquired at the same time we acquired the land for Marathon School. So the school will be located between Marathon and Startline Brewery. The entrance to the school will be at 147 Hayden Row, which people who drive that route might be familiar with. There's an abandoned house that's at 147 Hayden Row, which will be the driveway.
Okay. So being on Hayden Row, I feel there's already a lot of traffic in the morning. Mm-hmm. Have you guys had any considerations for decreasing traffic with adding another school there?
Yes, so we've done a lot of things in the design of the project to try to mitigate traffic. So putting additional students there, we recognize is bringing additional students to that area, additional traffic to that area. The first thing we did is we put the building proposed design pretty far back on the site. And this was done primarily to increase the size of the driveway so that we could increase the number of cars and buses that could queue on the site so that they wouldn't create the overflow back onto Hayden Row. The next piece of this is actually we're going to be connecting the Marathon School and the new Elmwood School via a roadway between the two sites, which will allow better traffic flow for both cars and buses who are coming in, especially those that might be dropping off at both schools. So that'll improve the traffic flow. There are some actual traffic benefits to co-locating the schools in this way. The first one is that the school estimates they'll be able to eliminate 12 bus runs. People may have noticed in neighborhoods right now, there are elementary school buses that almost follow each other and make the same exact stops. One of those is going to Marathon and Hopkins, one of them is going to Elmwood. By co-locating these schools, we eliminate the need for that second bus in those situations. So this would reduce the bus traffic. It would reduce the bus traffic that's going across town to where Elmwood is right now. And it would have the effect of shortening bus routes because the school would have more buses and bus drivers to deploy since they'd be freeing up these buses. We're also looking at potential roadway enhancements to Hayden Row to see what we could do to mitigate the traffic impact. The other thing I would note is, as a result of our traffic study that we did for this project, the schools made the decision this year to adjust the start and end times of the elementary schools and the high school to separate them a little bit. The traffic engineer recommended this as a traffic easing method because it will allow time for a little bit more settling in between. And the school reports that they've seen a good benefit to the traffic on Hayden Row as a result of this change. So we're pretty confident that while we know that bringing this many students to this location will have an impact on traffic, that we've done as much as we can in the design to mitigate it and that we won't have a significant increase.
Great. How do you know that this school will be big enough? Looking at what just happened with Marathon, have you guys thought about or planned for expansion and?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I was actually on the Marathon Elementary School Building Committee as well. So I have pretty direct experience with what happened in terms of that school being built and needing expansion. Actually, before we broke ground, it needed expansion. The short answer, well, it's not that short an answer, but at the time we built Marathon, the enrollment projections that the Mass School Building Authority was using had not caught up to what was happening in Hopkinton. So we were experiencing, as we all know, tremendous growth due to some development, due to the attractiveness of the school district, and we were consistently outpacing our enrollment projections. In the time between Marathon and when we got this project queued up, that had sort of settled into the model. And the Mass School Building Authority, their enrollment projections were much more in line with our district's enrollment projections, which was not the case when we built Marathon. in partnering with the Mass School Building Authority, they put some parameters around what you're allowed to build, and part of that is you have to use their enrollment projections. So in some ways, we knew at the time that Marathon was going to be too small, but there wasn't a lot we could do about it. In this case, because those line up better, we feel much better that those enrollment projections will be accurate for the building. That being said, we have designed the building with the ability to easily add on classrooms to each of the 3 wings in the case that it was needed. But we do not think it will be needed, certainly not as soon after opening as Marathon did.
Oh, well, that was my next question, if you guys plan for room for expansion. Great. So talk to me, let's go back a minute. You were saying about reducing the buses if these 2 schools shared a location. Would there be less buses on the road as well?
So potentially. We were actually just discussing this at an elementary school building committee meeting shortly ago. So the freeing up the 12 buses allows more flexibility for the district to figure out what they're doing from a busing perspective. The primary objective in talking to the district would be to keep the number of buses but shorten the bus routes. The number one piece of feedback that came from the transportation study that they recently ran was that the bus rides were too long. And in some cases, those bus rides are upwards of 45 minutes. And so the first thing they would want to do is shorten up those bus rides for students who have had a long day and have activities after school to make sure they can get home. In the case where they could do that with fewer than 12 buses, it does give them the flexibility to reduce the number of buses on the road, which would have both a traffic, environmental, and cost impact to the district.
Great. Does this budget include everything the school would need, like furnishing the school with desks, chairs, computers, smart boards, everything?
It includes everything from a physical plant perspective. So it does not. The only thing it doesn't include is the teachers.
Okay.
But it part of this project and this project budget would be everything from desks and chairs, smart boards, lunch tables, lunch chairs, every piece of furniture and equipment that would be necessary to open this school.
Okay. So this new school, are we voting on if it's going to be grades 2 and 3, like the current Elmwood, or is it only going to be 2 through 4?
So the project that's being voted on at November's town meeting is for a 2, 3, and 4 school. The decision around the number of grades in the building and that grade configuration is one that the school committee made. And the school committee made that decision because they felt like with the capacity constraints we have across all schools, this was the most efficient way to solve that problem because we get Mass School Building Authority reimbursement for this project. So we only go, as part of the process, we bring forward a proposed single project to town meeting, and in this case it is a 2, 3, 4. So
Okay.
the town is not voting on what the particular configuration of the school is.
So is that part of why there's such a significant increase in cost from what we've seen for previous schools?
It's part of it. I mean, so if you think about it, the Marathon, I mean, the first thing you can say about Marathon as compared to Elmwood is that was a 2-grade school. This is a 3-grade school. So necessarily it's going to be about, 50% more in cost than Marathon was. That combined with the increases in population, so Marathon was designed for 395 students. This school is being designed for 1,195 students. And so we're obviously building it for the larger population, the 3 grades, and then the general construction inflation that has gone on across all of these, not just school projects, but the construction industry in general. Since we built Marathon, the construction inflation has been about 36%. And so that's obviously a significant driver of the cost increase as well. Just to give you an example, a question I get a lot is Ashland just opened an elementary school that cost around $90 million. And so the question has come up, why does ours cost $158 million? Ashland School, which bid out a couple of years ago, so obviously you can have less inflation, is being built for just over 600 students. This at $158 million is being built for almost 1,200.
Okay. And the 158 million, is that including the amount that you guys are estimating the state will give us back?
Yeah, so this is this is really tricky, and they kind of don't make it easy on us. So $158 million is the full price tag for the project. It is not what the town will spend, and it is not the amount that we will borrow.
Okay.
So we are expecting about $46 million, give or take, from the state in reimbursement. That is guaranteed reimbursement. So they have already told us what the maximum amount of the reimbursement will be, and that will be certified at their MSBA board meeting on the 25th of October. So the town will be on the hook for something more like $112 million, and that will be the amount that we will borrow and pay. It doesn't help sort of the communication of it that what we have to put on the warrant is the full price tag of the school of $158 million, but that is not what we'll pay. I would also note that there are a potential of up to about $10 million in reimbursements that we're eligible for from the Mass Save program, as well as the federal government and the Inflation Reduction Act, because of some of the sustainable choices that we've made around materials, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. So in total, the actual project cost to the town could get down as low as $105-ish million.
So if this project passes, what will the taxpayers feel from it?
Yeah. So if this passes, that $100+ million will be paid for, obviously, directly out of property taxes. The town has done estimates for what the impact would be to taxpayers based on projected interest rates that they've gotten from their lenders. So we would borrow this over a period of about 3 years, and the loans would be 30-year loans. Which is typical to what we've done with other school projects and what most other towns do for school projects. On average, over that 30-year life of borrowing, the average homeowner in Hopkinton, which is a price for reference of about $753,000, would see an increase of $750 roughly in their property taxes to pay for this school. I say average, it doesn't work like a mortgage, so it's not a flat number. It would peak in 2027 tax year at around $1,000, and then would slowly go down over the length of the loan as we pay off more and more of the loan. It's a 30-year loan, so we're estimating that we'd be able to borrow at around 4.5%. Obviously, interest rates have been going up recently. Should they come down, even after we borrow, the town has been pretty diligent in refinancing its debt. So if interest rates do come down, they might even be able to reduce that amount further. But that's what we're projecting right now.
If the town borrows that amount and they do refinance, does that have to go to town meeting for a vote?
Refinances do not have to go to town meeting for a vote. So what town meeting votes on is they vote on the appropriation of the money, and they vote on the authorization to borrow. How the town borrows, what interest rate they get, what bank they use, any refinancing is all done through operation under the town manager's office.
Okay. So in the proposed school building, is there any plans to do solar, have incorporated into the building or in the parking lots?
So the building is being built what we call solar ready. So we did not include purchasing solar panels in the project, and that's because the school and the town have used power purchase agreements on all of their buildings. So essentially, the provider puts the panels on. We don't own the panels, but we get the benefit of the electricity bill savings. And based on discussions with the town manager, the superintendent, the facilities director, we would want to be consistent and do the same thing on this. So we did not include the cost for solar panels in there, but the roofs are being designed to accommodate solar, and the expectation is that shortly after the building is open, if not before, we would enter into a power purchase agreement as a town and put solar panels on this building. Parking lot at this point, I don't believe is planned for, but certainly the parking lot can accommodate it as well. Actually, a lot of the, there are requirements about some of the infrastructure we have to put in the parking lot to allow for the possibility of that.
Okay, great. Another question that we've had was, will other town groups be able to utilize the school after hours or on the weekends?
Yeah, so it will be similar to other school buildings in that the public spaces, especially, will be able to be used by other town organizations. It'll be operated the exact same way the other schools are, so they do facilities use requests. And if there's a fee, they'd pay the applicable fees. We did design the building specifically so that what we thought were the most often used public spaces, like the gym and potentially the cafeteria / auditorium, they're at the front of the building, and the classroom wings are behind it, so that we have the ability, or the school has the ability to lock off those classroom wings. So if, say, Hopkinton basketball is using the gym on the weekends, they can access the gym through the front entrance, but no one would be able to access the classroom wings. And so it's easily designed so you could make it, people could use those public facilities without any kind of concern about them going through the rest of the school.
Okay. So if this doesn't pass, talk to me about what Elmwood would look like in the next couple of years.
Sure. Just from a process perspective, let me start there. If it doesn't pass, what happens is the project effectively ends. And so in order to, if we wanted to eventually build a new school that was a different school, we would have to re-enter the application process with the Mass School Building Authority. Typically that takes a few years to get back into the queue, and then we would have to go through the entire process that we've just gone through in terms of site selection, initial design, feasibility, all of those things. So you'd be looking at probably pushing the project out by 3 to 5 years, but probably more on the 5-year side. We have some experience with this in Hopkinton. Marathon was not the first time we tried to replace Center School, and that was a delay of, I believe it was about either 4 or 5 years. In terms of what we would have to do to mitigate the situation at Elmwood, I think it's important to note that by making this a 2-3-4 school, we're actually, as I mentioned before, relieving the capacity problems at a lot of schools. So you build the 4th grade onto this, Hopkins becomes a 5th and 6th grade school, and that opens up space in the middle school, which is pretty crowded right now. And so the two buildings that would probably be most impacted would be Elmwood and the middle school. And in both cases, you would need to look at modular classrooms. So, well, let me start. It really, especially at the elementary level, comes down to what are we comfortable with from a class size perspective. So typically in the elementary levels, we've been looking at, we've been targeting 22, 23 students a class. The classrooms are pretty tight in Elmwood because they're 60 years old. And so we would have to consider, the district would have to consider how much we want to allow those class sizes to go up. If we want to mitigate that, we would have to purchase or lease modular classrooms. We've done that in the past. Elmwood has some right now that are attached. We probably have to look at the spaces where we could put them on the Elmwood site. But it doesn't solve some of the infrastructure challenges. So as the student count increases, the cafeteria is not large enough to not only hold the number of students you need for regular lunch shifts, but serve the number of students to get them through the line, the lunch line in a timely fashion. The gym, obviously you'd have to think about how many gym sections you have, the outdoor play space at Elmwood, and there just isn't sufficient space to expand any of those common spaces. So it would be a really tight environment for a period of 3 to 5 years until we could get into a new project that hopefully would then be passed at town meeting. So the overcrowding would continue to build up. Also, we'd have to make significant investment in Elmwood from an infrastructure perspective. This is what we call an end-of-life project. So, over the next few years, we're going to obviously do the things we need to do to keep Elmwood up, but probably not as heavy investment as you would make in a school that you're expecting to be around longer. And so that would have to be considered a cost too. All of those costs of expansion would obviously not be eligible for MSBA reimbursement, so the town would have to pay for those as a whole, and then we'd have to go through the process again. And quite frankly, the construction costs aren't likely to get less expensive over the next 5 years.
Well, it sounds like if we added more modular buildings around the yard, that the kids would have less and less space to be outside, which a lot of people are trying to get more outside time and fresh air for children.
Yes, and yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. It's basically a certainty. If you had to have those modular classrooms, you'd have to add them into some of that outdoor space. There just isn't room on that site. One of the reasons we chose the site we chose and not to build something on Elmwood was the site itself is smaller and it's a little bit more restrictive in terms of what we could do, and so you'd be experiencing the same thing if you added the modulars.
I see. When is the project anticipated to be completed?
So right now, the project timeline would have it completed in January of 2028 for opening essentially after winter break of the 27-28 school year. Our architects and project managers have said that if we follow this timeline, we do everything we can to try to get it open by the beginning of the 27-28 school year. But conversely, a question I get is people will say, so if it's the middle of the year, would they move in immediately? And the answer I've gotten from the administration is unequivocally, absolutely. As soon as the school is ready, they will move people in. So we'd be looking at probably a winter break, move over, and the students would then begin going there in January of 28.
Okay. Some people have said that if this doesn't pass, that the future of the current Elmwood might look like no music classrooms, no art classrooms, maybe not even a gym anymore, because they would have to turn all of those spaces into classrooms to accommodate the growth. Is there truth behind that?
So this is a little bit of a difficult one for me to answer because I'm not really in sort of the day-to-day operations of the school, except to say that we have, the district has been incredibly creative with the space that they have in Elmwood, in Hopkins, even in Center School before it. And it has at times included eliminating an art room and doing more art on a cart, where the art teacher comes to your class, the student's classroom, rather than the students going to an art classroom. I think as we start to see increases in class sizes, it's very likely that the school district would want to make trade-offs like doing that and having another classroom rather than having a dedicated art classroom. These are things we've seen in the past when the schools get crowded. It's difficult to say that they would happen again. I think it also depends a little bit on the answer to the couple questions ago, right? If the town authorizes the rental or the leasing or buying of modulars, that might mitigate that. So it sort of depends on which path the town takes if the project doesn't pass.
Do you have a rough estimate of how much a modular costs?
So we did recent projects we've done in Hopkins schools. A few years ago, we added 2 modulars for, I believe it was $1.9 million. And I think a recent project was 2.4 for the same number of them. So it depends a lot on exactly what you want from a modular classroom. Are you attaching it? Are you not attaching it? Some of those, but it gives you kind of the order of magnitude of what you're talking about for modular classrooms.
Great. I think that's all the questions I had. If there was anything else you wanted to mention.
So I think the one thing I would want to mention is working backwards first. So the town meeting for this project is going to be on November 13th. So this is where the citizens have the opportunity to weigh in and vote on whether or not we're going to move forward with this project. Following town meeting, there will also be a town ballot vote on the 28th of November. Both are required under state law for this project. So it has to pass both town meeting with a 2/3 majority and at the ballot with a simple majority. Also, on October 24th and November 7th, both at 7 p.m., we're hosting public forums at the high school auditorium that will also be available via Zoom. And one thing I have been, it's always tricky when you're this close to a project, is as we're getting close to town meeting and I'm starting to talk to people, there isn't a huge amount of awareness out there about this project. And so I would really encourage people, if you don't feel like you know everything you need to know, or even if you do about this project, come to those forums, get your questions answered. It's great to get those questions earlier because we can provide a lot more thorough and thoughtful answers than we might be able to on the floor of town meeting. So again, October 24th, November 7th, 7 p.m. at the high school auditorium.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
At the Hopkinton Public Schools, safety is our first priority. Our students need to feel that they are safe before they can begin learning and growing. As part of our commitment to safety and security, people who need to conduct business at our schools should go to the main entrance, press the buzzer, and explain the purpose of your visit. Wait to be admitted and do not hold the door for those behind you. Other than the main entrance, all other entrances are locked for security.
I'm John Palmer. I'm here with the Hopkinton Historical Society. We're located on 168 Hayden Row Street.
Only 34% of children are highly resilient. These findings come from the Cigna Resilience Index. The MRP Project's Raising Resilient Kids program is for parents who want to ensure their child can positively and productively overcome life's obstacles.
In the 6-week series, we'll highlight the essential role obstacles play in children's development. Each class focuses on one topic, and the facilitators provide time for problem solving and group discussion. We also spend time during the first couple of sessions discussing ourselves and our own resilience. We can't expect our children to be resilient unless we're modeling resilient behaviors for them.
One of our recent participants said, "I walked away from this series with new language to use with my children and to help guide them through situations they may encounter in everyday life growing up. I am truly grateful for the discussions, encouragement, and guidance that this series provided." If you want to sign up, visit themrpproject.org